Ryanair could look for an alternative aircraft supplier to Boeing because of US tariffs. That was the warning from company CEO Michael O'Leary Thursday.
On January 12th, Delta Airlines announced that it was ordering 20 Airbus A350-1000s. When they enter service, the aircraft will be the largest type operating in Delta's fleet.
Look, Jim, it is what it is. We've got to manage through the programs that we have. I would say across our defense business, we've got some pretty tough contracts, and that's been well publicized.
It didn't start with a crash. It started with an email. On the morning of May 7, 2025, a quiet message landed in the inboxes of Boeing's executive team. Subject line, Ryanair withdrawal. Just 16 characters that would shake the foundations of America's most iconic aerospace company. Ryanair, Europe's largest low-cost airline and one of Boeing's biggest customers, had just canceled its next batch of 737 MAX deliveries. Not because of safety concerns, not because of quality issues, but because of price, specifically tariffs. And the blame was pointed directly at the White House. The story of Boeing is more than just about airplanes and manufacturing. It's a narrative deeply woven into America's industrial identity, a symbol of technological prowess and innovation that helped define the 20th century. Founded in 1916 by William Boeing, the company transformed from a small operation in a Seattle boathouse to the global aviation giant that connects our world. For generations, Boeing has represented American engineering excellence, with its commercial and military aircraft serving as ambassadors of American industrial might across the globe. But the world of 2025 has changed dramatically. Global supply chains have become increasingly complex, international tensions are rising, and the old certainties no longer apply. By noon on that fateful day in May, 3 more dominoes had fallen. A major Turkish carrier demanded a contract renegotiation. A Latin American airline paused all new talks, citing price volatility. An African national airline froze its purchase plans indefinitely, stating that U.S. policy was simply too unpredictable to base a fleet strategy on. Inside Boeing's C-suite, the mood shifted from cautious to catastrophic. Donald Trump's trade war had just landed on the tarmac, and it hit Boeing dead center. His policy was brutal. A 25% tariff on all aircraft components across the board. No exemptions. No carve-outs. No advance notice for an industry that runs on years-long contracts and razor-thin margins. It was nothing short of an economic missile strike. Even Boeing's executive team, who had once assumed their American-made status would protect them, was completely blindsided. In January, CEO Kelly had confidently told investors not to worry. We've got across our defense and commercial business roughly $500 billion of backlog. This administration is pro-jobs. He believed Boeing was the definition of an American company. He believed Trump's wrath would fall on foreign rivals like Airbus. He believed Boeing would be safe. He was wrong. By March, it was crystal clear that these tariffs weren't surgical. They were a sledgehammer. And Boeing was bleeding badly. The European Union's response was swift and furious, $100 billion in countermeasures. At the top of their list, Boeing's commercial jets. Civil aircraft, long considered untouchable due to their strategic importance, were now pawns in a global trade war. And the cost was immediate and devastating. Ortberg summoned Boeing's board into an emergency meeting. He warned Congress that if the EU's retaliatory duties stuck, Boeing stood to lose $3 billion in orders by year's end. He wasn't exaggerating or playing politics. He was desperately trying to sound an alarm that few in Washington seemed willing to hear. The domino effect was breathtaking in its speed and scope. Air India froze a 9-figure wide-body jet deal. Emirates restarted talks with Airbus. Lufthansa delayed all new Boeing purchases until the tariff situation was resolved. And then, the supply chain, that invisible network that makes global aviation possible, began to crack under the pressure. In Canada, Boeing's landing gear supplier stopped shipments. In Germany, a critical avionics firm suspended production. In Japan, an electronic component supplier walked away from a 10-year agreement. These weren't small, replaceable vendors. These were specialized manufacturers creating components that simply can't be substituted overnight. Back in the United States, the effects rippled through communities that had built their entire economies around aerospace. In Charleston, Boeing froze hiring at its massive facility. In Wichita, engineers were told to find domestic replacements for parts now choked by tariffs, replacements that simply don't exist in the American manufacturing landscape. In Texas, a composite supplier laid off 70 skilled workers. In Arizona, a cabin interior contractor shut its doors after 3 decades of operation. Then came what insiders called the rare earth crisis. China, retaliating in its own calculated way, restricted the export of rare earth elements materials, absolutely vital for Boeing's power systems, sensors, and flight controls. Production didn't just slow down, entire assembly lines went dark. And competitors, smelling blood in the water, moved in for the kill. China's COMAC, once dismissed as a state-subsidized joke, began aggressively underbidding for contracts in Africa and Southeast Asia. Brazil's Embraer, once nearly acquired by Boeing, gained surprising traction in Latin America. Even Airbus, normally Boeing's fiercest rival, joined in an unprecedented joint call for de-escalation, warning that the entire global aviation industry was teetering on the brink of collapse. But the damage had already landed, and it was brutal. Ryanair canceled 3 aircraft orders outright. Delta delayed its 2026 fleet expansion plans. And Emirates, historically Boeing's crown jewel client, signaled it may shift future orders elsewhere if costs don't stabilize soon. These weren't just lost sales, they were strategic relationships built over decades, now severely damaged or destroyed. Internally, Boeing's CFO admitted the stark reality: if tariffs hold, revenue could drop 10% in 2025. If China retaliates again, that figure could easily double. One board member, speaking on condition of anonymity, put it bluntly, "We're being sacrificed for a soundbite." That soundbite came straight from the Oval Office. At a press conference that sent shockwaves through the aviation industry, Trump declared, "We are protecting American skies. If Boeing cannot adapt, someone else will." The implication was clear: even America's aerospace champion wasn't too big to fail. While Boeing struggles to rework contracts and stop the financial hemorrhage, Airbus is thriving in the chaos. Their production facilities in Europe are running at maximum capacity, and their order book is swelling with contracts that might once have gone to Seattle. And COMA, the Chinese aerospace manufacturer once dismissed as an inferior copycat, is stepping confidently into the void, offering attractive financing terms and political stability that Boeing currently cannot match. Leasing firms that once locked in orders for Boeing aircraft are now rapidly diversifying their fleets. Market share that took decades to build is slipping away in a matter of months. And Wall Street is paying very close attention to every development. Boeing stock has dropped nearly 20% in just 3 weeks. Credit agencies are whispering about a potential downgrade that would make borrowing vastly more expensive. Some analysts are even suggesting Boeing might have to split, separating its commercial and defense divisions just to protect investors from the fallout. Meanwhile, Boeing's boardroom has descended into chaos. Some executives are pushing for deep price cuts to salvage deals at any cost. Others argue such moves will destroy the brand's long-term profitability and reputation for premium products. Ortberg finds himself caught in the middle, pressured to preserve both shareholder value and global reputation in an environment where those goals seem increasingly incompatible. Congress is completely gridlocked on the issue. A bill to exempt aerospace components from tariffs failed by just 3 votes after intense lobbying from both sides. House Democrats and Republicans from manufacturing states tried to rally a bipartisan fix, but the White House responded with threats to double tariffs if Congress dared to interfere with its trade strategy. This is not just policy anymore. It is economic warfare on a scale rarely seen in American business history. And Boeing, once the crown jewel of American manufacturing, is losing ground by the day. What began as a simple tax on parts has become a scorched earth campaign that could permanently reshape the global aviation landscape. The damage isn't just financial, it's foundational. Airlines are fundamentally rethinking their long-term fleet strategies. Suppliers are reassessing their dependence on Boeing contracts. Even Boeing's international sales teams are reporting open hostility from customers, many of whom now view the company as politically radioactive in their home countries. And make no mistake about what's at stake here. If this trade war continues on its current trajectory, the next $10 billion aircraft deal won't go to Seattle. It will go to Toulouse, France, where Airbus is headquartered, or worse, to Shanghai, where China's aerospace ambitions are rapidly taking flight. The question troubling industry insiders is no longer whether Boeing can survive this year of turbulence. The question is whether this American industrial icon can survive this administration's approach to global trade. Because in aviation, once market share is lost, it can take decades to regain if it can be regained at all.